right, so I believe we're recording now. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the country. Welcome to this week's Franchise Partner Spotlight webinar. For anyone that does not know me, my name is Wes Barefoot. I'm the Director of Franchise Development for ShelfGenie. If this is the first webinar that you're joining us for, just a little overview on why we do these webinars. Each week we invite a different one of our franchise partners on to talk a little bit about their experience with ShelfGenie and just provide another way for people that are interested in learning more about ShelfGenie and our franchise opportunities to hear from some of our different owners and learn from their experiences and the insights that they've gained through their experience with ShelfGenie. So we will open it up for Q&A periodically throughout the call today. There's also a chat box. So if it's easier to, I'm going to try to keep everyone on mute until we open it up for Q&A just to prevent too much background noise. So if it's easier, feel free to send any questions or comments through the chat box. I'll be keeping an eye on that. So without further ado, this week we have Jeff Cohen and Raffi Iskenderian joining us. Jeff and Raffi are our franchise partners in the Boston, Massachusetts, and surrounding areas. Jeff and Raffi are business partners, and I will let them introduce themselves and share a little bit of their background in terms of what they did prior to joining ShelfGenie. But as you can see on the screen here, Jeff and Raffi have been franchise partners since 2009. So they've been with us since almost the very beginning of ShelfGenie and had a great run so far. You can just kind of see some of their background here and some of the different committees and involvement that they've had over the years, including some of the awards that they've collected. Raffi, it looks like maybe only Jeff got the top drawer award in 2013. Somehow or another, you missed out on that one. I don't know what happened there, but no doubt Jeff and Raffi have had a lot of success with ShelfGenie and have learned a lot over the years. So these guys are a tremendous resource to not only the other franchise partners, but for anyone that's considering getting into business for themselves and looking at ShelfGenie as a possible option. So with all that being said, I'd love to turn it over to Jeff and Raffi, and whichever one of you wants to go first is fine, but maybe just share a little bit with everyone in terms of what your background was prior to joining ShelfGenie, how you got introduced to ShelfGenie and ultimately ended up becoming franchise partners.
You can pick one of us, Wes, sir.
All right, Jeff, go ahead. You can lead this one off, and then Raffi can follow, and we'll flip flop.
Got it. So thanks, and Wes. This is a great thing that you're doing. I think for the system and just for us to be able to share and be a resource. And Wes has been, for folks on the call, Wes has been very helpful to us over the last several years. So you're all in some excellent hands there. In terms of kind of background prior to ShelfGenie, I have a strategy consulting background. Got an MBA along the way, ended up at Capital One for a bunch of years. I was in the strategy group for a year, and then moved out to a group in outside of Boston that was doing financing for elective medical procedures that we then extended into doing financing for home improvement projects. And that's where Raffi and I first met, and we worked together along with Brett Chevrier, who's one of the Florida franchisees right now. So we were doing financing for windows, siding, roofing, basements, working with the contractors, and we saw a lot of some really shady practices. We saw a lot of good trades folks that weren't good, really strong on the business side, and we saw a handful of kind of really good businesses that treated customer service as the number one thing. That did great work. If they made mistakes, they figured out how to fix the problem. And Raffi and I always said back then, if we could ever find the right type of business and do it in the right way in the home improvement space, we would try to do that and get into business together. And being in a financial services company during the Great Recession of 07 and 08 was interesting if you're not living in the middle of it, but very, very scary while you're in it.
Okay.
And Capital One actually shut down that division. I had left about a year before to go do a couple of other financial services related things, and they were all kind of crumbling down at the same time. And for myself, I reached the point where I said, I'm tired of being back in consulting, tired of working for somebody else, and I wanted to do something either on my own or through a franchise. And Raffi and I had been discussing whether there was an opportunity to partner. We were working with franchise. I was working with a franchise broker, introduced us to ShelfGenie, and it felt like a great fit back then, and it's still an excellent fit. It's in the space that we wanted to be in. We didn't want to be locked down to a storefront that people came to us. And we wanted to be with a franchise that was still fairly, it was very young at the time. It's still relatively young compared to a lot of others, where we could have a lot of influence in the system and not just kind of follow a script that, that is so baked that we can't use our minds. We're just following, executing a 300-page document. It was much more wide open when we started 10 years ago. And I think Raffi and I are both very proud of our contributions in the early days to kind of help get the system to where it is. But it's still very much a vibrant, evolving situation, which keeps us very much engaged.
No, that's great. I mean, that's some really good background, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I'll hand it over to Raffi to add anything to that. And Raffi, I should have mentioned earlier. So Raffi is one of the most recent additions to our FAC, which for anyone that's not familiar with that, FAC is our Franchise Advisory Council, which is currently made up of 7 different franchise owners that meet on a regular basis with the executive team in the home office, and are very involved in just, helping to determine, the future trajectory of the company, and very involved in any new initiatives that we're considering to roll out. So it's a big time commitment. So, Raffi, congratulations on that, and appreciate your contribution in that regard. And as you guys can see, both Jeff and Raffi have been very involved in the organization since joining, and have contributed in huge ways in a numerous different areas of the business. So, but Raffi, with that, go ahead and introduce yourself and share any of your background that you think would be helpful for folks to hear.
Thank you. I'll echo what Jeff said about what Wes is doing and how important these types of engagements are, and so we can please share some of our experiences with the system that we're in. Quick background on me: I've worked at several startups throughout my career, and I've always thrived in the startup environment in a corporate setting, and then went to business school at Babson, which is an entrepreneurial business school, and then ended up meeting up with Jeff at Capital One. And when we worked on the home improvement financing area, we worked with and looked at multiple different businesses in the home improvement. And one of the things that stuck out to both of us was that a lot of these guys were in sales and marketing companies who happened to be doing home improvement types of projects, siding, windows, doors, decks, as Jeff mentioned. And that was very intriguing to us because we believed and we had that mentality. And the other thing that was very important to us that we learned is in the home improvement industry, the bar is, in my opinion, very low to beat to become a shining company in front of customers. And we built our company based on customer service from a product plus from a service perspective. And we built upon that, not only with our ShelfGenie company, but we have 2 other companies that we have grown and are continually growing together synergistically, with ShelfGenie being the core. So.
Yeah, that's great. And that's actually maybe a good segue into something I was going to ask you guys about. And I didn't give you a heads up before, but if you're comfortable, maybe share a little bit with everyone on the call as to some of the other businesses that you guys have gotten involved in since starting ShelfGenie, and how that's been, what are the pros and cons? I know, I'm working with people currently that own other businesses and are kind of looking at adding ShelfGenie to the business or businesses that they own. So maybe share a little bit about what the businesses are, how you got involved in them, and in your eyes, what the pros and cons are with having another business outside of ShelfGenie. And Raffi, you can take that one if you want to, and then Jeff, of course, feel free to add anything to that.
Okay, good question. So when Jeff and I decided to get into business together, our strategy and our mission was we weren't just going to do one business. We wanted to build a platform of multiple businesses in the home improvement industry, all based on and differentiating from others with customer service and building a good culture within our company. When we got into ShelfGenie and we started learning about, the ins and outs for a couple of years, and did a lot of home shows and met a lot of different companies. And when we do our ShelfGenie product, we, outfit people's kitchens and pantries. Most likely those people are not going to be ripping their kitchens apart. And several times after that, we got phone calls about, hey, you guys did the insides of the cabinets. We love them. Do you know anybody who can, do the outsides of the cabinets without replacing them? And we used to refer everybody to some of the people we met throughout the home shows and through our networks. And we kept on getting a consistent message back. Hey, they were good. Either they didn't show up or the job didn't completed right. They had some issues. They didn't close the loop. And Jeff and I looked at that as an opportunity, saying that, hey, we've done such a great job of building our cachet with these clients up front with ShelfGenie, and now we're handing them off and we don't know where they're going. So why don't we consider doing a refinishing business? Mm-hmm. So we decided that that's our next synergistic business to get into. And we looked at various different opportunities, and we ended up starting another company called Cabinet Cures, where we do refacing and refinishing of kitchen cabinets. A lot more involved, a lot more operational business than ShelfGenie. And so we've been doing that currently for the last, I think, 7-8 years as well. We have our own shop, and we do a lot of the finishing and procurement ourselves. And then 3 or 4 years ago, we said, okay, we're ready to kind of branch out and do our next business. And we looked around and we started evaluating multiple different opportunities throughout the spectrum of products available and services available in home improvement. And closets kept on coming up throughout the years of, people wanting to do closets, big category, developed category already in the market. And we decided to start our third venture, which was called Under New England Closets. And we have been doing it for the last 3-4 years, pretty successful at it. We're growing nicely. And we, very similar to the ShelfGenie business, where we are more of an installation company versus a manufacturing company, which we like a lot. We don't have to deal with all the manufacturing and all the details and issues that come along with that. And we're a dealer of a company down in Pennsylvania, and we procure everything through them, and we design it and sell it and install it. And some of the quick pros and cons you asked about. So I think one of the pros is that we have multiple customer bases that we can market our 3 different products to. That's one pro. So if we go in for ShelfGenie, then we can potentially sell them closets or sell them Cabinet Cures down the line, sure, and vice versa. We are differentiated through our individual 3 competitors, if there are any. ShelfGenie doesn't have many solid competitors, but we can differentiate ourselves easily. For example, for Cabinet Cures products, to show our ShelfGenie branded items to put into the cabinets, or for closets to say, hey, we do also have solutions for your kitchens with an accredited product line. And it's also when we do in home shows and we exhibit all 3 companies, people come in for one, and then they'll start seeing what else we can do for them and the deal they can get working with us. So that's been a definite positive. Yeah. From an opportunities perspective or challenges perspective, you have 3 companies, you have 3 sets of employees, you have 3 sets of rules, you have 3 sets of different processes to follow. So your focus kind of goes away from, sometimes on some of these ShelfGenie calls, and while we're talking with some franchisees who are dealing with just ShelfGenie, some of the things in some of the data and decision-making things don't apply to us because we're looking at it at a global level versus just the ShelfGenie level. That's mainly probably one of the biggest challenges, to trying to figure out to allocate our time where we can, if there's something for ShelfGenie or Cabinet Cures or New England Closets. We have 3 email addresses. Who do we email it from, and is it so that becomes a little cumbersome and challenging until we kind of put everything under one umbrella at some point.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But I love what you guys have been able to do, and you talk about kind of positioning all of your businesses around providing great customer service, and I totally agree. And I think everyone listening to this has probably had a bad experience with some sort of a home service company, not doing what they said they were going to do, or not following up, or not being timely. And so what you guys have been able to do essentially is provide in a sense a one-stop shop for your clients, where not only are they going to get a great service, but great products and services, but the experience is going to be better, and they can work with one company that they've come to trust and know is going to do what they say they've done, versus having to shop around in multiple places for these services. So, Jeff, anything to add to that, or anything that you would point out outside of what Raffi just mentioned?
No, I mean, I think you hit it pretty well, and what you said is right. Is for us, there's nothing better and more rewarding for one of our customers from one of the companies calling us and say, "Hey, you help me with I glide out to my kitchen. Can you help me with my master closet?" Or, you did a great job with the closet. Can you help me with the kitchen? And what we're seeing more and more is, those cross marketing opportunities are going in all different directions. And we've got a number of customers that have gone for the trifecta, where we've worked with them on all 3 companies. But it does come with the cost. It is. I was on the phone with another franchisee earlier today, and he is spending more time being more innovative with some of the marketing things he's been doing over the last several months than we are on the ShelfGenie side, just because we don't have 100% bandwidth dedicated to it. But I think in the end, for us and for the system, it's a win-win for us to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. And we have numerous other franchise partners within ShelfGenie that also, own and operate other businesses outside of ShelfGenie. And so for you guys, it was ShelfGenie first, right? And then you added the other businesses. And I think we've got some examples where ShelfGenie was added to other businesses. So maybe talk a little bit about, knowing what you know about the ShelfGenie business, and also, owning and operating other businesses. What would you see as some of the pros possibly with adding ShelfGenie as a complementary business to another business? Jeff, maybe take this one if you see any, kind of pros knowing what you know.
Yeah, I mean, the ShelfGenie business relative to the others, it's a lot simpler and cleaner, and that holds for all 3 of our businesses. So, the important thing, I'm sure you'll get into it, is having a great team in place. And as long as you have a great team of designers and a great team of installers, then the owner's role is really acting as a coach, a developer, motivator, making sure everything stays on the tracks, and figuring out the marketing opportunities and approach, and doing the networking and things like that. So we've been fortunate in the sense we've got a team that's our designers have been with us over 5 years, some as long as 8 or 9 years. Our installers have been with us for 5 or 6 years. They're all very engaged. They believe this stuff just like we do.
Yeah.
And once you get to that place, it frees up a lot of our bandwidth to go, spend time playing in other sandboxes that, again, will turn around and help ShelfGenie and vice versa. If you don't have the good team, that's where energy needs to be spent on getting those folks good, or swapping them for folks that can be good.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt. I mean, that's a big part of the coaching that I do with anyone looking at ShelfGenie is, the team's got to be in place. Otherwise the model really doesn't work. So I'm glad you brought that up, and it's a good segue, I guess, into another question that I had was, so for the folks listening in, maybe give them an idea of kind of what your ShelfGenie territory includes, how many territories you have, and then what does the makeup of that team for ShelfGenie look like? And then maybe a follow-up question to that in conjunction with what we've been talking about would be, are you able to kind of cross-train any of your employees throughout your 3 companies to, work in other companies, or do you have separate teams entirely for each business? And just to keep it fair, Raffi, you want to take this one?
Sure. So when we first started, Jeff and I, the company, our company, and we knew that we weren't just going to do a small operation. We wanted to build a good size home improvement company. And we really believed in the ShelfGenie product and the system. And so we ended up initially buying 5 Boston territories, which was mostly all of Eastern Massachusetts of Boston. And then a couple of years later, we ended up buying Cape Cod, which is the 6th territory we own in Massachusetts. We started in the beginning, both of us designing and I installing in the beginning. And that's been pretty consistent with all 3 of our companies, just so we can understand the ins and outs of, the objections, and because that's very important, the sales process and how we sell the product. And then we started adding designers, and we've been pretty fortunate to have loyal designers for the last several years in all of our companies. And I think that's part of due to the culture that we've built within our company. And we're not nickel and dimers. We're actually here to develop people versus, penalize them for small mistakes.
Yeah.
We have a couple designers who can cross-sell, but typically we've kind of kept our design team mostly within their own vertical.
Yeah.
If it's a simple, like for example, for example, recently ShelfGenie, we were required to put up the SketchUps. So if somebody just selling cabinet cures may not be as well versed to doing a full ShelfGenie appointment. However, almost all of our cabinet cures jobs have some sort of ShelfGenie incorporated in it. And our designer knows enough about, our cabinet cures designer knows enough about ShelfGenie to be able to sell the value and sell the product. Our closets designers sometimes get asked a lot about the ShelfGenie product, and they'll refer somebody to a ShelfGenie designer to come in if it's a more elaborate project. Jeff and I made the decision several years ago that we want to make sure that when we send the first initial person to the house, it's the reason why the customer called us for. If they call us for ShelfGenie, we're going to send the ShelfGenie trained, ShelfGenie expert designer in, and then we can start investigating what other opportunities there are there. If, and vice versa with all of our, to be fair to the company and to be fair to the customer as well.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So that's interesting to hear. To kind of, I guess, maybe pivot away, because I want to make sure that, we do focus primarily on ShelfGenie here. Not everyone's, in a position where they would be, adding ShelfGenie as a second business. But I really appreciate the insight, and that's a topic that I wanted to make sure that we hit on today. So I appreciate you guys sharing some of that with us, and trying to just make sure there's no chats that have come in. So here's what I'm going to do.
One quick thing to add on just the ShelfGenie part.
Yeah.
I mean, we love our ShelfGenie business. We loved it so much that we ended up buying the Philadelphia territories a few years ago, and we operated it remotely for 4 years. Jeff and I continue to say if we could have the $10,000 ShelfGenie sales all day, and that would make life a lot simpler, and we could probably be a lot happier and be more successful financially. So I mean, part of the challenge is finding those sales all the time. But we love the business. We love how the business is operated, and the low involvement from an operational perspective to run, because we know on the other end how involved the other businesses are and how attractive ShelfGenie is, standalone as a standalone business or as a part of another business.
Yeah, and that's a really, really good point. Because I think, especially if you're already involved in another business, chances are it's probably going to have, more moving parts and pieces than what ShelfGenie requires. We're probably going to have more infrastructure than what, the ShelfGenie business requires. Probably more overhead. So that's one of my favorite things about this business. It's simple, and don't confuse simple with easy, but it's simple in that there aren't a whole lot of moving parts and pieces.
Yeah, I mean, and just the other thing to add, and Jeff and I could be doing a lot better job at it, but our focus has been kind of multifaceted. There's a lot of opportunity in the markets for ShelfGenie. There's ton of opportunity. Every one of our customers, if you look at the reviews, says they're super, super happy with the product. They love it, and not one person has returned it back to us. So there's ton of opportunity out there. It's just a matter of, focusing and trying to attract those things and going after them.
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, maybe talk a little bit more to that specifically, because that's a question I get a lot, and I understand why. But a lot of people kind of wonder: is there really enough demand for a custom glide out shelving business for it to be sustainable? So I mean, you guys are 10 plus years into this now, or right around 10 years into it. And another question I get pretty often is, what does this business look like in a down economy, right? A lot of people would think that, maybe glide out shelving is more of a luxury type product or more of a want than a need. So what have you guys seen in your experience? I mean, 10 years into this, do you feel like, you're kind of starting to max out the territory that you have, or do you still feel like there's plenty of meat on the bone? What do you see in terms of the demand? Jeff?
So I mean, we're still scratching the surface. I think we still have more of an awareness problem than anything else. And we look at the closet space, and there's lots and lots of people searching for closets. There aren't lots of people searching for pull-out shelves. There's a lot more now than there were 10 years ago, but we'll still walk into a home. One of our designers will walk in and say, "Where have you guys been? I've needed these." And we kind of kick ourselves like, well, you haven't been where we've been advertising for the last 10 years, obviously. So I think there's a great opportunity there. One of the neat things for us being 10 years in is a lot of our customers from 2011, 2012, the early years are moving now. 7, 8, 9 years later, and they're moving to these 55 plus communities. And some of these communities are older, some are brand new, but none of them have pull-out shelves. And they're calling us before they even move in, and sometimes before they even close. And they say, "Can you guys come out, meet me with the broker, take your measurement, because I want you to come and install. I'm closing on Wednesday. I'm moving in on Friday. Can you come install on Thursday?"
Yeah.
And they're moving into a 100-unit development or a 60-unit subdivision, and none of them have these pull-out shelves. And I think that just is going to build and grow, over time. And as the category gets more mature, and as the web technology users get older and older, I think that's going to grow, not shrink over time. In terms of a recession, one of the interesting things for all three of our companies is it's something Raffi and I think about, a lot, and how we would deal with the recession and the downturn, because ultimately, there has always been one, and there will always be one. We started at the bottom of the last recession, so I think we have a pretty good sense of what the world will look like. The nice thing about ShelfGenie is it's not a huge amount of investment. When the economy slows down, people are not going to be moving as much and doing that $3,000-$4,000 modest upgrade to make their home more functional, especially as they're older and aging in place, and they see more of a need. It becomes less of a want product and more of a need product, and I think that will be fine. Our cabinet cures business, where people aren't going to be doing the full renovations like they've been doing as much, and so I think demand across the board will go down. But I think the people will still want to be doing kind of that modest aesthetic upgrade as well. And then in the new construction market, certainly will take a hit. And again, although we're doing some with the 55 plus communities, it's still, especially in Boston with an old housing stock, most of our business is still going to come from, from homes and kitchens that were built, 10, 20, 50, 100 years ago.
Yeah, mostly retrofitting. Well, no,
Yeah.
I mean, that's really good insight, and I'm glad that that kind of, came up, because it is a question that I get, pretty regularly, and I wasn't around ShelfGenie back then, so it's great to be able to hear from, some of you guys that were in business. What type of, and you don't have to share like specific numbers, but what type of, do you feel like you were able to grow your ShelfGenie business, year over year while the economy was still kind of on its way back up? And I realize you guys were, in your ramp up period that first, couple of years. But what did you see in terms of growth as it pertains to ShelfGenie during that time frame?
I mean, that's where we did our biggest growing. I think even across the system, even now at our size, we're still such a small blip of the economy. Individual execution, individual performance will, and continuing to do a great job will help buffer some of the economy. If it's in the economic downturn, if it's a recession, depression worse than the last one, I think that's going to be problematic for everyone like the last one. But a modest recession, a small business that is executing well will should do okay and weather through. And that's where we think we are. And it weeds out, and especially in some of these other companies, other businesses that we have, a recession will weed out kind of the weaker players and the less sophisticated, the ones that are less able to execute and weather a downturn. You just want to be smart about your marketing then, and keep your overhead down. And that's where companies get into trouble, where they have a lot of fixed costs and fixed overhead. And ShelfGenie, again, with very little fixed overhead, if any, is well positioned to you bring revenue down a little bit if necessary, but you're not trying to meet a big kind of monthly commitment of lots and lots of employees and lots of real estate and other fixed costs.
Those are great points. Very, very good points. So I'm going to open it up and see if there's any questions. I just want to make sure that if anyone does have questions, we take those. So I believe everyone on the call is unmuted. So are there any questions for Jeff and Raffi? Anything that you'd like to have them expand on, or just any even unrelated questions that you'd like to hear them speak to? You guys have just been so thorough.
There you go.
Not even room for any questions. So that's all right, because I've got plenty of questions. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about, because you guys have a little bit of a different dynamic in that you're business partners, and we have a few other examples of this throughout the system. We have quite a few husband and wife teams, but your dynamic's a little bit different. So maybe talk a little bit about how you guys have the role of the owner, kind of split up between the two, and maybe I'm wrong here, but do you kind of have you divided responsibilities? Do you each kind of have certain aspects of the business that you're responsible for? And if so, how did you guys go about, determining that, and just maybe explain kind of how that works for you guys' partnership?
So Jeff and I knew each other from Capital One. We worked together for several years, and we knew each other's strengths and opportunities. And I think we make a very good fit together. We're both analytical when it comes to, analyzing and solving any of our problems, not necessarily just marketing, also operational. But the way we decided to divide up the business so we could each have core responsibilities is we both help each other to make the decisions, but Jeff is more responsible for the front end of the business, meaning marketing and sales. And then once we have the sales, we toss it over to Wall, we call it, and I grab it. And then I have my team on all three businesses. I mean, and part of the reason why we did it that way is because we knew we were going to grow into more operational heavy businesses.
Right.
I mean, we have quarterly meetings, and off the cuff meetings about a lot of our finances, about some of the marketing, what to do, what not to do. So we bounce each other. We bounce, if I have operational issues, employee issues, I'm always, talking to Jeff about it. And that's been probably part of another good reason for our successes, because, if I was alone dealing with these types of businesses, I don't know if I would have handled some of these decisions in the way we ended up talking through them and handling them versus, more rapid responses and less thinking and more quick judgment that really happens in this industry all the time. So Jeff and I have done a pretty good job of kind of thinking through those, and we've used our partnership as a strength from that perspective.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so, maybe to expand a little bit on some of the quarterly meetings that you guys have, or maybe even a better way to ask the question would be, because, one thing I respect very much about both of you is just how well you understand the business from an economic standpoint, and, what are some of the levers that a franchise owner should really be focusing on to try and drive better results. So, for you guys in your business, what are some of the key metrics that you're watching very closely on a regular basis? What are some of the KPIs or whatever the terminology you use is that you look at very regularly that really drive performance in this business? Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, so the two critical ones, on the ShelfGenie side, it's cost per appointment and revenue per appointment. And it's, for us, we talked about the business being simple, which doesn't mean easy, but simple is, at the beginning, of the month, beginning of the year, we're spending a lot of money on marketing, and we have a marketing plan on what we're going to spend. And, the trick is to keep your cost per appointment, as low as possible. And that's spending a good amount of money to get the number of appointments that we want, but also to kind of, consistently try to work with our different vendors and different franchisees and try to generate, appointments, at as low a cost as possible. And along with that, try to make sure that we're doing the self-generating activities and the networking and the cross-marketing and the follow-on sales and working with our designers on that. So the first part is really, how do we make sure we have enough leads and opportunities to run over the course of a week, of a month, of a quarter, of a year. And the second part of it is then once we get those opportunities, what do we do with them? And that comes down to the revenue per appointment and how efficient are you when you go into the home? What's your close rate? What's your average ticket size?
So explain what goes into revenue per appointment. So I think everyone on this call I've done the pro forma review with, so they understand. But anyone listening in, later that may not understand what we mean by revenue per appointment, how do we calculate that?
Yeah, so essentially, Wes, it's your close rate multiplied by your average sale. So if you have a 50% close rate, you run 10 appointments, you close 5 of them. That's great. That's a 50% close rate. And then what's the average sale on that? On those 5 sales. So you have a $3,000 average sale and a 50% close rate. Your revenue per appointment is $1,500.
That's
and what we
example I always use because I'm not good at math and it's nice, easy, round numbers.
There you go. And you can get that revenue per appointment up in 2 ways. Either get your close rate higher, or you get your ticket size higher. And so our challenge and when we are mentoring and coaching and teaching our designers is one more sale out of every 10 appointments, and one more pull out shelf on every sale has a dramatic improvement on your revenue per appointment and their earnings potential on their commissions and the business's ultimate profitability. And we've got some designers, and we've seen some designers with a relatively lower close rate but a much higher ticket, and other designers have a higher close rate with a lower ticket. And there's different ways that we'll teach and coach and mentor to try to get both of those numbers up. But that's really the key. If you can keep your cost per appointment low, keep your revenue per appointment high, then it's the rest of it kind of falls into place.
Yeah.
And then the third one we'll look at is just the net promoter scores and customer satisfaction and just on the efficiency on the back end to make sure our labor percentages are coming in where they need to be, so we're efficient there and our customers are happy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other metrics we can look at. There's a lot of other ways to slice and dice the data, but at the end of the day, and for Capital One, we're no strangers to slicing and dicing data until until your eyes are bloodshot beyond belief. But at the end of the day, it's cost per appointment, it's revenue per appointment, and it's a happy customer base.
Yeah. No, and that's one of my favorite things about this business is, I mean, there's only, a couple of things that are so critical that if you're able to make even modest improvements, so, RPA, a modest improvement in RPA, and then expand that out over the course of the year can have a massive impact on both your top and bottom line. I think I'm a big fan of, focusing on things that I have the ability to impact, right? And not spending a whole lot of time and energy on things that I'm not going to be able to impact. Revenue per appointment and cost per appointment to an extent, for sure, are things that our franchise partners have the ability to impact and improve in those areas of the business. And you can see dramatic results coming from that. So maybe kind of building off of that,
Can I just add one quick thing to that? Is this just 2 points? 1 point, because of the wish portal that ShelfGenie has, that puts a lot of us in an advantage where we're not having to create all those ourselves. For example, in our other businesses, Jeff, spends hours and countless hours a month putting all that data together versus using wish portal to report. Just running reports and looking at. So I think that's a very important point. That's a benefit that we get with ShelfGenie. Plus, alongside of, in addition to the benefits of the customer relationship management through wish portal that we do in the order management, whereas in our other businesses, we're running around with Excel spreadsheets and everything saved in Dropbox. And just taking that numbers thing to higher level is I'm not sure if the attendees own businesses or do not. Whatever business you do, you got to know your numbers, at least to look for the numbers and understand them on a very frequent basis, because you got to look at that as an opportunity to make better decisions with data versus not knowing and understand them, where you could be continuously making bad decisions for your business and not really know what's going on and continue to make those bad decisions.
Great points. Thanks for bringing up Wish Portal, because I think it is a massive benefit that our franchise partners have, just having the numbers at your fingertips. Because you're absolutely right. I don't care what business it is, you got to know your numbers, and if you don't, you're just burying your head in the sand. And having them, essentially at your fingertips is just going to save huge amounts of time, as you just explained. So those are great points. And so, building off of that, one of you mentioned earlier, you've had some designers and installers on your team, since you opened pretty much. So, and we usually on these calls, and I know it's something that on my one-on-one calls with candidates, we talk a lot about in terms of, what are some best practices when it comes to recruiting designers and installers. But, maybe talk a little bit about what you guys have found to work when it comes to keeping good designers and installers on your team. And in particular to the designers, what have you found in terms of best practices for, mentoring and developing these designers so that, if they don't have an RPA that's as good as you'd like to see, what have you found that works to help kind of coach them to get to where they have a better RPA and they're performing at a higher level? I'll let either of you take it.
I spend more time with the designer, so I'll take first crack at it. I'll leave my wife does design work also, so if she wants to leave me, then she's kind of stuck. But for all the rest of them across all the businesses, a lot of it is just having a lot of conversations just to make sure that we're aligned and clear in terms of goals and expectations. And we have, I think, in Boston, relatively fewer designers for a territory of our size than others, and our folks are doing relatively more appointments per month than others. And that's a decision I think that we made several years ago that's worked well for us. That we're big enough, we have enough markets. As long as somebody's willing to drive, that we can give them, a good number of appointments to make it closer to a full-time, earnings compensation opportunity. And our designers, our primary ones, and each of them are viewing this as it's a full-time, 100% earnings type of opportunity. And that, in other markets, in Philly, when we had Philly, we had a couple of part-time designers, and in Boston, we've had a couple of part-time designers. And as long as we're clear about how many appointments are we striving to have you do a week, a month, and if that works for everybody, that's good. As long as we're clear about what their responsibilities are to follow up, to do network building, relationship building activities, I think is good. And in terms of coaching and maintaining, a lot of it is just staying on top of it and being the coach, asking how the appointments went, having them walk through very specifically what went well, what didn't go well. We did a lot more riding along earlier with folks than we had recently, I think. And then really setting goals and challenges. And this idea of, you say to a designer, geez, how do you get from a $1,500 RPA to a $1,800 RPA? And it's like, oh my goodness, it's $300 every appointment. How do I do that? And you break it down, it's like, you think you can get one more sale on every 10 appointments you run. How about one more sale out of every 20 appointments you run?
Yep.
And on half of those, do you think you can get one more pull-out shelf? Maybe you do 3 in the base cabinet, or maybe you do a bathroom, or maybe you get the pantry the first time. And you try to break it down into its component pieces and make it less daunting and less, one big number at the end of the year.
Yeah, I love that. You gotta understand what the pathway is to get there, not just kind of have this, goal hanging out there, but not really have an idea of what they can realistically do to hit that goal.
Yep, and it's the same thing for us. If Raffi and I at our level across each of the businesses, if we say we want to do X, hundreds, thousands of dollars, $1 million of revenue, how many appointments do we need? How much do we need to spend on marketing to get that?
Yep.
What do we need to have for a revenue appointment? What do we have to do for margin, and pricing and labor percentage and overhead? And how does that all flow through? And then it's tracking it on a monthly basis. So we'll spend time each month with each of our designers, going through what's the close rate, what's the ticket size, where are opportunities to improve that. And for me, we've been expanding our design team on the closet side. It's been good to get through that, because one of the things we hear at conference every year is onboarding and and doing a great job at designers, and we've been much more focused on maintaining the design team that we have, keeping them engaged, keeping them excited, and keeping them performing and improving over time.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so, do you guys do like regular meetings with the whole team or with the designers, like monthly, or do you guys have kind of a structured format for that?
It's come and gone, Wes. It's one of the things where I think we need to be doing more of and better of. One of the challenges of having such a large geography is it's sometimes harder to get everybody together. But when we look back, on on some of these meetings, and we say, what are we doing well and what are we not doing well? I think we can do better at bringing folks together on a more regular basis.
Yeah. I know we have the same opportunity in our business as well. And one of the things we've recently started having our designers do is each week they're sending Kelly a scorecard where they kind of recap the appointments that they ran that week, what the outcome of the appointment was, if it didn't result in a sell, what follow-up steps have been taken, and what future follow-up steps will be taken. And we didn't implement that until maybe 2 months ago. But so far it seems to be working, because it's just got them thinking about it. And it's one more thing that they're kind of being held accountable for. And then it really opens the door for Kelly to do some more coaching. So, I think having the goals, up front, and then kind of backing into what needs to be done to hit the goal, whether that's, you as a business owner or, your designer and what they want to do. I think that's a great approach. So, appreciate you sharing that. One question that came through in the chat, this is from Stuart, and Stuart's out in California. So First question from Stuart. How important are home shows / events in your ShelfGenie business? And whichever one of that aspect of the business may be more relevant to, that might be you, Jeff. What would you say in terms of home shows? How big of your strategy is that? And what type of results have you seen from home shows or any other events that you guys have participated in over the years?
Yeah, so home shows are, it's an important part of our business. It's ShelfGenie, the Glyouts are very much touch and feel, to have the light bulb go off type of product. So it's been great to have that. Having multiple businesses, I think, has helped with the home shows. It feels like the home show industry has been in a state of kind of gradual but steady decline over the years. From going back into the 90s and early 2000s, well before we started ShelfGenie. When we talked to folks that have been in business for 20, 30 years, they would tell us how great home shows were back then. But every year they seem to get a little bit smaller, fewer vendors, fewer attendees, and it seems like every year our yield gets a little bit better. So our revenue that we're getting from home shows has stayed relatively consistent. But the internet has definitely taken the need out of a lot of folks to kind of go, on a Saturday, to go to the local convention center and walk the floors for a few hours. But it means that those folks who are going are more serious buyers, and they're there for a specific purpose, to do something. And if we can intercept them and have ShelfGenie be part of the kitchen project, or they're thinking about home improvement and they can add ShelfGenie onto what they're there for, those are still good things. We don't have, I think in other markets, they've got the 10-day state fairs and lots and lots of folks who, for whatever reason, Massachusetts doesn't really have that. So I think it's home shows is a little bit less of our marketing mix than other markets, just because those opportunities aren't there.
Have you guys done any other events that maybe wouldn't be like an actual home show where you're setting up your full home show display? Any other that have been?
Elizabeth does, she does a lot of one-day, street festivals and, town days and fairs, and we've learned over the years which ones are good and which ones, or it's not our clientele or not the right demographic. And there are lots and lots of those out there. It's just figuring out, and again, investing the time to figure out which ones are worth it, and they're short dollars. So you get 1 or 2 sales out of it on a small dollar thing. It's got a really attractive ROI.
I mean, the other thing that's an opportunity, Wes, is like we mentioned before, all these 55 plus communities that are, growing in every state. Those have a lot of different, vendor day, those types of things. And then I think we are a very, very nice product for. But like Jeff said, it's we have to figure out how to get in there and not necessarily exhibit a full display, but get our product and get our services in front of them.
Yeah, I know we've done a few of them in our market and just had amazing results. And, one of you brought up a great point earlier in terms of just, how to get in front of, clients and the ShelfGenie business in particular. Most people are not going out and searching specifically for glide out shelving, right? So at something like a home show, you can pretty safely assume most people are coming out to try and get some ideas for different projects and different, home improvement, things that they could do around their home. Some of these other events, I've found them to be successful because, it may not be that type of a venue where people are coming out specifically looking for like a home improvement product, but we have a very visually attractive product. And it's the type of thing that when people see it, a light bulb usually clicks, right? And so that's something that we had to kind of, I guess, teach ourselves, was that, all right, yeah, the home shows, that's kind of a no-brainer. It makes sense, but kind of maybe think outside of the box a little bit in terms of what are some events that might be good for us to be at, even if people are not necessarily coming out specifically looking for, home service or home improvement type products. And we've had some really good results that way. But you're right, over time, because we've had some busts too, right? And we're only a year into business. So, as we go for longer, we'll learn, what is a good fit, what's not a good fit. You can kind of start to eliminate some things over time from experience. But I think you've got to be willing to try different things and keep an open mind. when it comes to that. So we're coming up on the top of the hour here. Another question came through the chat. This one is for you, Jeff. So this is from Amanda, and she's asking, how has this been for you and your wife being involved in the business together? So she's a designer. And so Amanda says she has a design background and her husband has a sales background. So maybe speak a little bit to what that dynamic's been like for your wife and yourself.
So knock wood, so far it's been good. I think just clarity on it.
See this recording, so off the record.
Right. Just need to be careful. I think a couple of things. I think one is just like with any designer that you're not married to, is just clear expectation of understanding of what it is. What role is each person playing? Who has what decision rights? And if that is not clear, then I can see that causing a lot of tension. And then the other thing is, the business, my wife is a wonderful designer and has great results in performance, but it doesn't mean she's going to have a cold streak. We all do.
Sure.
To make sure that, I'm not coming home and saying, what the heck do you do? You're over 3, you're over 4. And conversely, try to not get too high, or she, nails 3 or 4, $5,000-$6,000 sales in a row. It's, very easy to come home and be, jumping up and down. And it's really trying to just keep an even keel and keep the business part separate from the family part. It's been wonderful for her and for us as a family. Is, my kids, when we started 10 years ago, were 10, 8, and 5. Now they're 10, 20, 18, and 15. And the dynamic at home is very different now. And Ruthie didn't do design work for the first couple of years because the kids were young, and she was a full-time mom and driving kids around all the time. But once Rebecca got her driver's license, that freed up a lot more time for her to go run more appointments. And so over the years, she's been able to increase her involvement. But for her and for us, it's still, she's the mom first. And so we need to make sure we're not overloading her with so many appointments that suffers. And Raffi also has a role to play in this also, where it's, we're partners, but I've got my wife also involved in the business. And if I'm giving her appointments where she gets a commission instead of me taking it, there can be some tension there. And again, as long as they're communicating, 100% clear, and everybody is understanding what expectations are, it tends to work well. And it's been a lot of fun for our family to be able to talk about the business and the learnings and accountability, ownership, and having passion, and seeing the reason, talking about stories of happy customers, for the kids to hear that growing up. I think it's just been a great thing for them to hear on the dinner table over the years.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. And I mean, my wife and I are in business together, and so I would echo everything that you just said. I mean, it's just, you got to have clear communication, right? And then, in my case, my wife still wants to kill me sometimes, but that was the case long before we ever got into business together. So nothing's really changed there. And when in doubt, she's right. That's kind of always been
right.
Philosophy. So, but no, that's a good question, Amanda, and hopefully that helps. So, well, look, guys, this has been great. We could go for another hour, but we'll go ahead and call it a day here. For anyone that's interested in, speaking one-on-one with either Jeff or Raffi and picking their brain, you can see their email addresses here. That would be the best way to reach out to them. Just let them know who you are and that you've been working with me, and that you're at the appropriate point in the process to start having some one-on-one calls with our franchise partners. And I know they'll be happy to schedule some time to speak with you and share some more of their experience with you. So maybe just in closing, if one or both of you want to just kind of, maybe give a couple pieces of advice that you would give to anyone that is considering getting into business for themselves, and in particularly ShelfGenie. What are maybe just one or two quick little nuggets that you've learned over the last couple of years that you would advise anyone that is considering getting into a business like ShelfGenie? Jeff, maybe you can start out, and then Raffi, add anything that you may want to.
I mean, the biggest one, I talk to folks who are thinking about ShelfGenie or going to business on their own, regardless of what it is just to make sure you've got a lot of conviction in what you're doing, and you're believing in what you're doing, and you're believing in the vision and the plan and the goal and the story. And that's necessary because it's not every day is a walk in the park. I tell people, most days are mostly good, but you have blizzards, you have wildfires, you have flooding, you have whatnot. When you're in business on your own, things happen. People quit. People do something stupid. Customers, we love customers. They're always right, but sometimes, they're unreasonable. And so there are challenges, but as long as you've got the conviction and your belief system is that, this is what you want to do, this is what I believe in, this is what is, this is going to turn into, that allows you to kind of weather those periods and keep an even keel. And, if you're not excited about it, whether it's this or whatever it is, and you're not passionate about it and you're not quite sure, then it's not the right thing, because the first time you have a bad month or the valve pack drops in the middle of a snowstorm, and nobody calls, or everybody's dealing with ice dams and not pull out shelves because they don't want to damage their new kitchen cabinets, then, that's going to cause you to make some short-term decisions that are, going to cause problems, and that starts a downward spiral. And I think, Raffi and I always talk about, as long as the story is intact, and as long as the long-term plan is making sense, then, we'll ride through any of the blips that happen.
That's great advice. Great advice. Raffi, anything that you'd add to that?
Yeah, I mean, going into business for yourself is, either people own it or not, it's very, very rewarding on a lot of levels, and it's very, very challenging on other levels. We're the last ones who gets paid almost all the time, and we have to weather the storms. I think my biggest advice is have clear goals and manage to those goals. Reevaluate your goals and put your goals on paper, and that's a very, very important part of business. Your personal goals and your business goals, and keep yourself accountable. So if you're going to be doing things for the business, for yourself, make sure you're carving out the time to make sure you're keeping yourself accountable. It's always also good to have somebody to bounce ideas off of and help you keep accountable. And those mentors it could be another franchisee, it could be a friend, it could be somebody, but somebody who can keep you accountable and not joke around with it. So I think those are very, very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, hey, really good stuff. Thanks again for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I know everyone that called in today or that will listen, after the fact, is going to get a lot of good information for this. So I appreciate you guys. Looking forward to seeing you here in a couple of weeks at the conference. And for anyone listening in, feel free to reach out to Jeff or Raffi if you'd like to pick their brains, and everyone here knows how to get in touch with me. I'm here to help however I can. So thanks again. Hope everybody has a great rest of the day, and we'll talk soon.
Okay.
Thanks, Wes.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.